Hi folks, I'm Chuck Black and we're talking about how not to become a good programmer. And the topic for today is don't use functions. And by that, of course, I mean you should be using functions. Let me explain what I mean. So my first piece of evidence is this. Do you see this? This is the code that is for 52 weeks of Python. This is the basics, the most fundamental stuff that we learn. And look at this, lesson 1, lesson 2, lesson 3. Already in lesson 3, we are talking about functions, and we'll be using functions for the rest of the course. It's so important that I have loaded it right up here at the very beginning of what you learn. It's not an advanced concept. It's not difficult to understand. So functions come very early in your learning and understanding of the Python programming language. So my second piece of evidence revolves around the fact that functions make your code so much nicer to write and so much nicer to read and understand. So here we are looking at functions. What I did in L02 devices is I put this functionality for creating devices all within the main line of the code. And you can see, even though this doesn't really do much of anything, there's a lot of code in here that is, frankly, even though I wrote it, I'll say it's kind of ugly. I don't want to be looking at this all the time. It's generating a random device that could be Cisco, Juniper, Arista. It's choosing a version. It's choosing an operating system, etc. I'm going to be using this throughout the entire class, and I don't want to have to be replicating it over and over again. So in functions, what I did was I put it within a function. Now all of that code that does all of this stuff and actually does a little bit more is isolated to this function, and then my main code, this is the logic of my application. All I do is create devices. See how much easier that is. And it even looks better when we go forward and we put that code into a module. Look at what my code looks like here. This is all my code is for this particular piece of functionality, because I've taken this ugly stuff that I don't really care about. You could say it's nice and clever and does interesting stuff in terms of creating subnets and devices, etc. That may be true, but I don't care about understanding that every time I'm doing every other lesson that I do in this entire class, and I use it over and over again. So putting it into a function and then loading that function into a module makes it so much easier to understand the code. My third piece of evidence is that it really is easy to write and to call functions. I'm not going to explain it to you now. Go look at the 52 Weeks of Python code, either the 10-minute version or the long-form version, to get all the nitty-gritty details of how to do this. It's very simple. Okay, my last piece of evidence is this. I found this at a site, Evolution of a Software Engineer. It depicts the evolution of somebody going from not being a software developer at all to being a true software developer. If you are at the point where you don't use functions at all, you're basically here. You're not going to move out of that level right there. I don't care how long and involved your code is. If you want to begin to progress from where you are towards becoming a programmer, maybe here or here, and eventually becoming a software developer, then you need to take that first baby step. And one of those first baby steps is learning to use functions. So if you want to become a good programmer, then you will learn to use functions.